All right, good evening, everyone. Good evening if you're on the Midwest to East Coast. This class is dedicated by the whole week of classes are dedicated by the Magri family in Ontario for the safety and security of all the Jews and everybody in Ukraine. So this class is dedicated to them. We know that learning Torah, the merit of somebody, is said to be an even greater protection or an even greater merit than saying Kaddish for someone, perhaps even giving tzedakah at times for somebody. So hopefully this will have its desired effect. Amen. Tonight, we're not going to do so much with, I can't, wait a minute, what's going on over here? I apologize, it's my other thing. Tonight, we're not going to do the weekly Torah portion. Rather, we're going to do about Purim. I figured Purim's coming up in about 2 weeks, and we'll get into it. My favorite holiday, not because there's a lot of drinking, which there is, but because it is the most esoteric of the holidays, I must say. You may say more esoteric than Yom Kippur. Yes. I'll explain why. So to jump right in, the Megillah is called Megillas Esther. The Megillah means a scroll, but Megillah literally means to reveal, and Esther literally means to hide. Megillas Esther is revealing that which is hidden, and that's really what this whole holiday is about. So Purim takes place between the first and second temples. First temple was destroyed 425 before the Common Era, so quite a long time ago. It's a rabbinic Yom Tiv. It's a rabbinic holiday. But the Torah tells us that all mitzvahs we have are alluded to in the Torah. So the Gemara asks, where is Esther alluded to? Now, why does the Gemara ask, where is Esther, the name Esther, or the person Esther, where is it alluded to? Why does the Gemara ask such a question? Because the name Esther and the name Mordechai are Persian names. We know the Jewish people were redeemed in merit of redeemed from Egypt, and because they didn't change their names. One of the things that we didn't do is change our names. So why would the Megillah record it as, that they record their Persian names? They all had English. They all had Hebrew names. Hadassah, Mordechai. I don't know what Mordechai is Hebrew. I have to look that up. But Hadassah was her Hebrew name. But so why is it recorded as her Persian name? So the Gemara, it fits very well with the whole theme of Purim. But the Gemara says, don't think that the name Esther is not from the Torah. The bottom line is, don't think the name Esther is from the Torah. In Devarim, apologize 1 second. Let me just close the door. It's a bit loud. I'm shooting from shul tonight, so it's a little bit wild over here. In Devarim, it says, there's a pasuk in Devarim, a passage in Devarim, which God's talking about the day that we don't, that we'll rebel against him. Well, Moses is telling us that when the day that we rebel against God, Anoichi haster aster ponai. On that day, I will hide my face. Haster aster. I will hide my face. So we see that the word Esther is written here. The question is, though, it's a doubled aster means like I will surely hide my face. There's gonna be a time. There's like a hidden aspect. Yeah, it's when there's like you heard this concept before. It says in the time of Gullus, in time of exile, especially now, there are two types of darknesses. There's one where you walk into a room and the lights are turned off. You know it's dark. Then there's what's called choshech kafel umechupel, a redoubled darkness, where it's you're born in the dark room, and you think that's light. That's the type of gullus we're dealing with, the type of exile that we're in, the type of darkness that we have, and that began during the destruction of the first temple. The whole idea of Purim is shrouded in concealment. After the destruction of the first temple, God, so to speak, hid his involvement in existence. He started interacting with the world in a very hidden way. The first 40 years in the desert, as we record in the Torah, we see open miracles. We see the man falling, the cloud laundered our clothing. We never had to go to the bathroom. We were protected from the sun, from the heat, from the winter, from the wind, all of our enemies. Everyone, open miracles. And then even the next 800 years, when we were in the land of Israel, those were known as the period of revelation. We also had the Urim and Tumim. We were able to speak, if you remember, from two parshas ago. The king, one of the Kohen Gadol's garments was the Choshen, and there was the Urim and Tumim. We would speak to the Urim and Tumim and ask Hashem, should we go to war? Should we not go to war? And it would light up saying what you should and shouldn't do. And then by the second temple, we didn't have that. We had prophets, 48 prophets in the first temple period. We had the Ark, the Aron, which took up no space in the Holy of Holies. And that was concealed. That wasn't there in the second temple, right? It was already dug. We spoke about that. It's in the tunnels. It was put in the tunnels during the entire second temple, I should say. So in other words, we were aware for the first 840 years or so, 860 years, we were very aware of Hashem's presence. And that all comes to a screeching halt by the destruction of the first temple. No Urim and Tumim, no Ark. We were very despondent and depressed. And that's sort of the backstory, the backdrop, I should say, of Mordechai and Esther. It was the beginning of this terrible concealment, which just kept going lower and lower. So we have 5 major holidays: Shavuos, Sukkot, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Hanukkah, and Purim. And all of them have to do with supernatural miracles. All of them had supernatural miracles associated with them. Pesach, obviously, the plagues. These plagues actually happened. The sea split. Shavuos, God revealed himself. Sukkot refers to like we spoke about before, the clouds of glory. These clouds that would protect us and shield us. Hanukkah, obviously, with the oil. But Purim, there was no supernatural miracle, which is reflected pretty well in the fact that on Purim, we're not restricted in any way. It's like a regular work day. A lot of people even go to work on Purim. Halacha says maybe you shouldn't if you can avoid it, but if you can't avoid it, you don't go. But even by Hanukkah, women don't work. They sit by the candles, especially the women. We have to sit by the candles for an hour, at least, or half an hour, unless it's Erev Shabbos. But women have to sit by their candles, and they can't do any sort of work that they want to do. So we see there's still some sort of restrictions. And it says, despite all of this, despite Purim having like no restrictions, and it's a regular day, you can drive your car, do what you want to do, our sages say that all of the holidays will be batel, will be nullified when Mashiach comes, except for Purim. What does this mean? Every Yom Tov carries a unique divine energy. During the later stages of Mashiach's arrival, now the beginning stages, the Rambam explains that the world will continue on its natural order. But eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be a level of divine energy that's so revealed, even on an average day, the holiness of an average day will eclipse the holiness of all the holidays, except when it comes to Purim. Yeah, we'll appreciate the ordinary day, the great revelations, the great divine energy being given in an ordinary day. And it'll show that's even greater than all the holidays, even Yom Kippur. And I just want to mention, the Gemara does not call it Yom Kippur or Yom Kippur. It calls it Yom Kippurim, which literally means the day, that's like Purim, day like Purim. And whenever we say, it's called the Chaf HaDimyon. When you say something is like something, that first subject is inferior to that which you're comparing it to. So by saying Yom Kippurim, we're saying Yom Kippur is like Purim. In other words, it's a wannabe Purim in a certain respect. Certainly in the times of Mashiach, we'll see that. It's like Purim. So there's something very holy about Purim. So what's so significant about Purim? Well, Hashem's name is not mentioned at all. This whole shrouded and concealment. The reason we were saved on a very simple level was thanks to Esther. She concealed her identity. And Achashverosh, the Medrash tells us Achashverosh was always trying to figure out who she was. And who was Achashverosh? Achashverosh is considered, the Talmud says, one of the 4 kings that truly ruled over the entire world. You had Achav, who was horrible, Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, Nebuchadnezzar, who was related to Achashverosh, as we'll find out, related to his wife, and Achashverosh. These 4 kings were truly leaders over and kings over the entire world. And if Haman actually knew that Achashverosh, the Medrash says, if Haman knew that Achashverosh was married to a Jew, he wouldn't have started up with the Jewish people. Now, Haman, how did it all kind of start? I know I'm kind of backtracking a little bit. So Vashti, Queen Vashti, the queen of the husband, she was the one that was really rich. She was an anical. She was a grandchild of Nebuchadnezzar, and she married Achashverosh. Achashverosh kind of married into wealth, married into royalty. Anyway, she made a party for just women. She was a horrible, horrible person. She used to chain Jewish women naked and make them do all sorts of weird things. She was disgusting and terrible. But she made this party, and she didn't invite Haman's wife. Haman's wife was also a horrible lady. And so Haman's wife, Haman's wife, hated Vashti. They hated each other. And Haman, he's such an egomaniac, such a narcissist, he always tried to figure out a way to kill Vashti. That's like the level of people we're dealing with over here. Anyway, just to that was a little bit of a side point, but to go back to Esther being Achashverosh always trying to figure out who Esther was. That's the whole. First of all, that's the whole reason why we conceal our identity. We wear masks on Purim because the whole idea of concealment. Again, but this going back to this idea, Achashverosh is always trying to figure out who she was, and it's going to play itself out. Very interesting. It's a very nuanced point in the Megillah, which I will bring up in a second. Just looking through the Megillah a little bit, there's an interesting episode. Queen Esther got married to Achashverosh the 7th year of his reign. He reigned for, what happened? It was now during the 7th year of his reign. So the story takes place during their 5th year of marriage, the 12th year of his reign. They were married for 5 years, and she finally reveals who she is 5 years into their marriage. And she makes a party inviting him and Haman, and she tells the king, there's someone trying to destroy my people. And the verse says, Achashverosh, it's a very interesting verse in the Megillah, in chapter 7. V'yomer hamelech, Achashverosh, says King Achashverosh, v'yomer, and he says, le'Esther hamalka, to Esther the queen, who is trying to destroy you. Now, I don't know if you caught it, but it was like a very redundant line. V'yomer hamelech, so said King Achashverosh, and he said. And we already established that he's about to say something. So why is it this double he's saying? So the sages tell us, talk about a dysfunctional marriage. The sages tell us that Achashverosh thought maybe because she hid herself, her identity, he never knew who she was. He thought maybe she was a commoner. He thought maybe she wasn't of royal blood. He didn't know who she was, and therefore a commoner. And he had this rule that he doesn't speak to commoners. Now he took her as a wife, but he would never talk to her directly. He would always have an interpreter speak between them. So for 5 years, he didn't speak directly to her. But at the party, she revealed who she really was. And she says, I'm actually from Shaul HaMelech, King Saul, which she was. And therefore, she's of royal blood. And now the king speaks directly to her. Because at first, he says. Why does it say he says twice? It's to tell you, to lead you to ask the question. And then therefore, you'll find the answer. That this is when she finally revealed who he was, and he started speaking to her directly. So that's on a very simple level. she was able to conceal herself, and all thanks to her, and she revealed who she was, and he had new respect for her and listened to her. Now, the Gemara, it says in the Megillah, a very famous line in chapter 9, the Kimu HaYehudim, the Jewish people accepted and begun that. The Jewish people accepted that which they had begun. What does that mean? They and the Talmud tells us they accepted and begun that which they had begun at the giving of the Torah. Let me explain something. At Mount Sinai, it says that Hashem put a mountain over her head and said, "Accept this Torah, or I'll kill you." Essentially, what the Talmud explains is, or especially illuminated by Chassidus, is that when the Jewish people, when we accepted the Torah at Mount Sinai, there was such a revelation of godliness, such a revelation of love by God, but with the miracles. God literally suspended nature and changed nature just for us, changed everything just for us. Everyone was a pawn. He turned all pawns. We were like pawns. He turned the pawns into queens on a chessboard. All these miracles, open miracles, and God said, "You want," and everything was taken care of. We had food, we had water, we had clothing. And God said, "If you want to keep this up, you got to, you want these like free handouts, so to speak. You accept my Torah." So of course we were going to accept it. We were living well beyond. We were living supernaturally. But it says, we finally, by Purim, is when we finally and actually accepted that which we had begun during the period of Mount Sinai, because there was no revelation. We accepted God and we accepted the Torah because there was no revelation at the time. Let me explain. When Achashverosh gave his ring to Haman, what happened? Haman said, there's these people, Am echad mefuzar mefurad. There's one nation that's scattered amongst everybody else. Now, the Rebbe loved that line. And the Rebbe said, Am echad. There's one nation that's scattered and placed all over the world. Haman knew that even though the Jewish people were of all different types, we had our own political disagreements and political struggles, and some of us liked each other, some of us didn't like each other. Some of us saw ourselves as Persian, we saw ourselves as Indian, whatever we wanted to see ourselves, and perhaps we even hated each other. He said, Am echad, there's still one nation. These people, they're one. At their core, I can tell they're one. Haman was a master Kabbalist, a super genius. He came from Amalek, but he was a super genius. Amalek comes from Esau, which we'll talk about in a moment. He was a super genius, and he saw through the core. He saw that these people, they might seem mefuzar mefura, they might seem scattered and differentiated, but they're not. They're one people. And he said to Achashverosh, there are people that are going to rebel. They live all over the place, but they're really united at their core, and they're trying to rebel against the king. What happened? What's the story? The story is very famous. Haman, he was second in command, and he told everybody that he's basically a god, and you have to bow down to me when you walk by. When I walk by, you got to bow down to me. You have to do whatever I say. And really, according to the Torah, there's no problem to bow down to a human being. There's a problem to bow down to statues, or you don't have to bow down to someone and say they're a god, but just to bow to somebody is not a problem. It says that when Achashverosh was convinced of Haman that he should get rid of the Jewish people, said Achashverosh gave him a ring, the ring that was used to stamp letters of approval. And it says at that time, Achashverosh brought the Jewish people, to a level of teshuvah, of returning or yearning to return to God, never before accomplished by any of the 48 prophets of the temple, of the first temple. He was hands down the most powerful person in the world. Probably the most powerful person ever since perhaps maybe the times of Noah or Adam. He was that more powerful than Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, Shlomo Melech. In the Torah, the Rebbe asks, why does the Torah, the Megillah opens up with like 6 or 7 verses talking about a party that Achashverosh was throwing, and in great detail, like the types of ornaments that were hanging, the types of food, to a certain extent, the vessels, the tapestries, the carpeting. What a waste. Yeah, as I had a teacher that said, the Torah is not Charles Dickens. He doesn't get paid by every word. I've heard me say that many times. I think it's a great line. The Torah doesn't waste words. So why is the first 6 verses or so detailing the party in great detail? It was trying to show how truly wealthy and powerful Achashverosh was. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars by each party. And this party lasted 180 days. He was truly wealthy, truly powerful. He had every reason for someone to listen to him and do whatever they want, because he could have just paid whatever, you can imagine. So when Achashverosh gave Haman the ring, it was giving him an insane amount of power. He gave him access to wealth and to arsenals and anything he wanted. Haman had tremendous influence. By the way, where did Achashverosh get all this wealth from? So it says that Nebuchadnezzar, yeah, we spoke about him Thursday night a few times in the Gemara shir, the Talmud class. He was vicious. He was a cannibal. He was horrible to his own family. He didn't want his own children to enjoy his wealth. So before he was going to pass away, he took all of his wealth and put them in a ship, I think like a copper ship, and sunk it before he died in the Euphrates River. And the one who found it, 6 generations later, Cyrus found the ship. Why did he merit to find the ship? Cyrus was the father-in-law of Achashverosh, according to most. And when the destruction, Cyrus told the Jewish people at one point, you can go back to Israel and build the temple. Right? There was the Babylonians from Nebuchadnezzar. They took over they destroyed Israel, destroyed Jerusalem, and took all the vessels. And then their empire kind of toppled, imploded, and Persia took over. So Cyrus was the king in Persia, and he said, you can go back and build the temple. And at that period of time, when he said the Jewish people can go back and build their temple, God revealed to Cyrus where in the Euphrates River this wealth is. And then eventually the wealth, he got all the wealth. He reneged on it. He said, you can't go. But he got all the money. And Achashverosh married into the family and inherited the wealth. Anyway, so the Jews were so scared of Haman and of such power, they did tshuva. They were threatened with total annihilation. And what's interesting, we'll talk about the response, which is what the whole Megillah is all about. So there were 2 opinions. Why did the entire nation have to be annihilated? What's the story? What happened? So I'll give you a quick answer. There's 2 opinions. Rashbi, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, because the Jews in Shushan, in the city, the capital city, participated in the party. They didn't just participate, but they actually enjoyed the party. What was the problem with that? The problem with that was Achashverosh threw a party because there was a prophecy that the temple would be rebuilt at that time. And Achashverosh was on edge for those many, for all those years, that maybe my empire will crumble, or I'll lose the Jewish people, or Israel will be restored. And according to his calculation, which was a miscalculation, the temple was not rebuilt, and he had all the vessels, and he was creating a 180-day party, invited every single person to come to the party, and they even had kosher food at the party, very glot kosher food. But the problem was at the party they had the vessels from the first temple on display, and I think they were even serving food in the vessels. And the Jewish people, a number of Jewish people, if not most, in the city of Shushan, all went and they had a great time. And they started to say things like, oh, we're finally accepted in society. It's a classic mistake to say that. We're finally accepted by these people. Yeah, eat, drink, and be merry. Let's enjoy the party. But they were enjoying from what was the party all about? It was celebrating their destruction, the end of their own people, their own glory. The Holy Temple was our glory. So that was one thing. The problem with that was one reason why we were all, we had this decree against us. But the problem with that is only the people in Shushan took part in the party. Because the people in Shushan took part in the party, the entire rest of the Jewish people had to be destroyed. So the Rabbanan, the rest of the rabbis, they give a different opinion, and they say we were all sunken in avodah zarah, in idol worship, or at least we were during the times of the first temple, and that's why the first temple was destroyed. And this was sort of like the last gasps of avodah zarah. So the Alter Rebbe says, the author of Torah Or and the Tanya, the Talmud says concerning Mordechai, he's called Mordechai a Yehudi. A Yehudi means from Judah, from the tribe of Judah. Mordechai Yehudi. But the problem is, he's from the tribe of Binyamin. And he brought up his cousin Hadassah, and he married her. It says that this might be a weird halacha, or a weird segula to most of us, but it says that it's a good thing if a niece marries an uncle. They're allowed to get married. If a niece marries an uncle, and she was orphaned, and they married each other, and he took care of her. I don't think they had any kids, whatever it means, marriage. But he married her. Yeah, he was married to her. So the question is, how could he have been married? How could she be married to Mordechai and then married to Achashverosh at the same time? So the Talmud says she was basically raped by the king each night, or whenever they were together. I don't think they were together. It seems like from the Talmud, they weren't together very often. Achashverosh was able to do whatever he wanted, and I don't think he was really into her per se. Whenever they spoke, whatever, it was as if it was against her will. What happens is in the fifth year of their marriage. Let me just explain something. What happened? Vashti was killed, and he needed to find a new queen. Achashverosh had to find a new queen. So he sends these messengers, these dispatchers, to find the most beautiful women in the entire world and bring them for a beauty pageant, for a beauty contest. And it takes a whole year. They're doing perfume and all these different things to get the ladies nice and fine. Like up to snuff, his snuff, whatever. And Esther gets picked. Now, she gets picked and she has to go. And they had to live inside the palace. These women had to live inside the palace. And there was no kosher food in the palace at the time. So it says that she lived, for 1 year, she lived off poppy seeds. That was my quiz today. She lived off poppy seeds. And that's one of the reasons why we have poppy seed hamantashen, which I don't think it tastes very good, but I'll take one for the team. So she wasn't very attractive by the end of the beauty pageant. She was emaciated, very skinny. She looked very unhealthy. She was green, which she became green another time. She turned green. The rabbi says she's green like a Martian. Yeah, she was very unattractive physically, very unattractive looking. And then Achashverosh picks her. Mordechai says there's something divine taking place over here. Esther was picked for some reason. It doesn't make any sense that she was picked. Physically, she was probably the least attractive. And she wouldn't tell anybody her name. She was stubborn. And she was like a commoner. She looked like, she didn't have any royal blood. There was like every reason not to pick her. And he still picked her. So during the 5th year, Mordechai tells her, the 5th year of 5 years after them being married, Achashverosh and Queen Esther, you have to go with Achashverosh, meaning you have to give in to Achashverosh. You have to be intimate with Achashverosh, which means they had to divorce. So why didn't the Torah tell us that they were, clearly that they were married? Which is an interesting little factoid. Didn't tell us because actually the book of Esther became the Megillah Esther became a bestseller in Persia at the time. So it doesn't clearly tell us they're married because Achashverosh is going to read the story. So that's, and a simple reason why everything is hidden, why God's name is not mentioned, why they use Persian names, all these different things, because it was written after the story and the story took place and it was going to be a big hit. So 5 years later, he tells her, you got to surrender willingly, and they divorce. It doesn't tell us if they actually divorced, but the Medrash tells us. And she has to submit. She goes to the king and to get his attention, which again, she fasted for 3 days, went to go get his attention. She told the Jewish people to fast for 10 days. For 3 days. I'm sorry, 3 days. She fasted for 3 days. They told the Jewish people to fast for 3 days. So again, she looks like a green. The Torah says she looks green, and he still accepts her and he listens to her, and they make a party. Okay. So now let me just go back for a second. So why is he called Mordechai Yehudi and not Mordechai Binyamin? Haman was dying for recognition from Mordechai. They said they were in the army together. The Medrash says they were in an army together. And Mordechai was like he was a general, or he was at least like a colonel. And so was Haman. And Mordechai essentially saved his life. And Haman didn't like that he saved his life, but he always respected Mordechai. And he was always trying to suck up to him and try to get his attention. Haman came from Esau. We know that because Haman came from Amalek. So again, Haman, he was an egomaniac, a narcissist. He tried to make it to the top of the game. So he wanted people to bow down to him. And when it came to Mordechai, Mordechai wouldn't bow. So Haman actually went nicely. Haman went politely to Mordechai and asked him, how come you don't bow down to me? Your grandfather bowed down to my grandfather. Why don't you do the same? This is an incredible story. I love this. It's a great comeback line. He goes, what do you mean? And Haman said that, Yaakov bowed down to Esau. When Esau was going to kill the family. Yeah, it says Yaakov bowed down 7 times. And not only Yaakov, but the entire family. Everybody bowed down to Esau. So there's no problem bowing down to people. And in fact, it's kind of like in your blood. Show some respect to me. And everything worked out in the end with, Esau, so bow down to me. So Mordechai, who was the Moses of his generation, he said, I come from the tribe of Benjamin. I come from Binyamin. And Binyamin wasn't born yet when that episode took place. We never bowed down to you. We never bowed down to Esau. And we never will. And Mordechai's attitude is a Jewish attitude. The word Yehudi comes from the word hodah, which means to acknowledge. When you bow, modim, it's an idea of bowing, submitting yourself to something greater than you, something beyond logic. I don't understand it, but I acknowledge the truth of it. I'm bowing my head down below my feet, so to speak. In other words, I'll do before I really logically understand it. So the Torah says Mordechai Yehuda. We're trying to learn, even though Mordechai comes from the tribe of Benjamin, but his attitude is the true Jewish attitude. We're not called Bnei Yisrael. At that point on, we're called Yehudim. He's a Yehud, Jahud. Yeah, you hear in like Gaza, they call us Jahuds. Yehud, called Yehudim, not Bnei Yisrael, not the children of Israel, but Yehudim. And that became the new attitude of the Jewish people. Mordechai had this ability. Haman was trying to get to Mordechai because Mordechai was the head of the Jewish people. And if Mordechai were to bow, everybody would bow. But the problem was Mordechai didn't bow, and so therefore nobody else bowed ever again. The question is, why didn't the Jewish people, again, so it kind of flies into the main question is, why didn't the Jewish people try to negotiate with Haman? What the miracle of the story is, Haman was upset with Mordechai, really. They wouldn't bow to him. But the Jewish people could have just negotiated and said, okay, that's Mordechai, but we're willing to do whatever you want. Why do you have to kill the rest of us? Because the Jewish people said to themselves, if there's such a decree to annihilate us, all of us, because of this, there's something spiritual going on over here. There's a spiritual reason why we have this decree against us. Our problem is not Haman. Our problem is within ourselves. We have an issue within ourselves, and we need to figure out and fix that issue. And it's a spiritual issue, and that's why we see before, like I just mentioned before, why Esther fasted for 3 days before she went to go negotiate with Achashverosh. If you want to negotiate, you put on your finest clothing, your charm. She was known for her charm. She came in green, tired, exhausted, emaciated once again, and then she tries to negotiate with Achashverosh, in a very and Achashverosh is only thinking he's very base. He's very he just thinks about physicality. Not the right tactic, I must say, but she understood, and Mordechai understood, and the Jewish people understood that this is a spiritual issue, and so therefore we need to remove ourselves from the physicality, from the materialism. We need to rid ourselves and focus on our spiritual problem. What happened was when Achashverosh made this decree against the Jewish people, there's a godly part of us. There's this core in us that never becomes blemished, that never gets physical, that never becomes materialism, has no desire for physicality. It never becomes blemished because of physicality, from any sin that we may do. And this decree ignited that level within us, that core. It brought it out. The Jewish people, when this decree came out, it was like the war in Ukraine, so to speak, in a certain degree. These people said, we see there's no other choice but to fight. Otherwise, we're going to just become consumed into Russian society. And they said, that's not who we are. We can't be that. We aren't that. I have to remain true to who I am. And at first you get scared. They were petrified. But then they turned to fighting. And they say, no, I'm not going to submit. I'm not going to submit to the fear. And that's exactly what happened with the Jewish people. We were at first petrified and fearful, and it brought out this, I have to make a choice. The Alter Rebbe says the Jewish people, the decree was against being Jewish. All they had to do was say, I'm not Jewish anymore, convert, or just say, I'm not Jewish. The miracle was that every single Jew remained a Jew and said, wait a minute, I know everything I've done up until now, maybe I didn't act so Jewish per se, maybe, but I still am Jewish. And because of that, it aroused within them that Jewish core. Which was an open miracle. That level of revelation and that level of depth that came to the surface, Yom Kippur tries to reach that level. Yeah, we say that it's a day of Teshuvah, Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a day of Teshuvah. It's a day of when our essence is revealed. But it takes a lot of work, and we might not necessarily get there. And we're the avoda of the day, the work of the day, the goal of the day is to try to reach that level. But that level came out in like one moment during the time of Purim. Yom Kippur is always trying to get to that level that Purim experienced. And it said there was no greater unity of the Jewish people, every Jew in the entire world. There was no greater unity of the Jewish people than the time of the giving of the Torah and Purim. Because we all saw ourselves for who we really were. We're all one. We all really come from one Father. We all really come from one body and one soul. And so naturally, just like I love myself, I love my friend, I love my brother and my sister, because we see the core of who we really are. First of all, does anybody have any questions so far? Is anybody here? So I don't want to get the next time we speak. I want to get into more details of the actual story, but I thought maybe I'd go over the story just a little bit briefly, of different ideas. I have a question over here. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, actually, I think from right here we'll take a pause, because I want to get the next thing I want to do is get into like more details of the actual story, and I know we kind of sporadic. I kind of jumped a little bit all over the place, but I think there was enough to take away so far. Anybody have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna stop here, and then we'll continue next week. But tomorrow is Tanya, and yeah, see you all there. Anybody have any questions? Would you have a question, Aristeo?